Have you ever been hated or discriminated against? I have. I've been protested. They can silence with my wicked rhymes.
She still has this look that she's about to bust some heads this
No,
morning.
it's just your comfy sweatsuit.
My, yeah, my
Or
comfy sweatsuit. I gifted her a sweatsuit because
it shrunk in our
it
day.
shrunk and it looks good on her, even better than it looked good on me. And it looked pretty good on me. And I tell you, good morning.
Good morning.
That was, yes, that was to you.
That was my cue. Okay. Alex tried to get me to stay in bed today. I was like, nope, gotta get up, gotta do this.
I offered her if she was really tired that we could do this another time, but it wasn't like, hey, you should stay in bed type thing.
I was tired because I was up at 3 a.m. and
Yeah,
I
she
almost
was.
didn't go to sleep till like almost 5, and my alarm was set for 5. But then I made the decision that because the kids had gone to sleep later, there was a bigger potential of them staying asleep later, which meant that
Quiet time.
we could do the podcast a little later.
For those that have been listening and watching the last couple episodes, Grayson's come in and crashed the party, which is cool.
But
And
sometimes we're going to talk about things that we don't want them to hear.
yeah,
So,
like we want to get deep into some things that we don't want them to hear. And one of those things, topics are this week is about something that happened 2021. And
so yeah, if you have kids, headphones, or listen to another time.
yeah. And for some people this is very controversial. For us, you know, like we've sat with this a lot, and I can speak on me. I've done a lot of work around this because there was a lot of anger that came up that we'll talk about for me, and a lot of history with regards to like threats that I've made to her and situations in the past. Sounds like it's hailing outside.
Because we're in Virginia and it's winter,
It's like mid 30s right
but it
now.
just rains a bunch.
Yeah.
Barely ever snows where we live.
So today's topic, do you want to say anything before we get into it?
Yeah, so kind of going off, I guess it's a part 2 of last week's podcast that we did on pregnancy and birth. This has to do with pregnancy, but early birth instead. And those early births are in 2 different forms, one natural and the other one by choice. So for those who are like, what is she saying? Abortion and miscarriage. That's what I'm saying.
Just to get it out there.
Yes. So, like I said, headphones for those who have kids or listen later in private.
Yeah, I'm just putting a disclaimer that this is our story, right? And we're by no means like putting anything out to anybody. You know, like once again, for me specifically, this was a very hard topic, and I still have a lot of discomfort around it.
Which is why I was like, I'm waking up and I'm doing this.
Yeah.
I don't want to wait another week.
Yeah, there's a lot
Do
of
it.
discomfort about publicly talking about this too. Like we've done a lot of work and talking with each other,
Yeah.
and I've talked with men that I've surrounded myself with about this topic, but I've never done it in this form. So the butterflies a
And
little bit.
I've thought about many times, we were talking about this yesterday about like why would or people don't open up certain things to the public, and that yes, there's a level of privacy of certain things and whatnot. And I also believe that through certain people, like I'm not saying everyone needs to do this, but for instance, for us as a couple doing this in this framework, like using a public forum to talk about things that are usually really hard, talk about things that most people keep to themselves and don't ever talk about with, their outside circles, is just a way for others that don't get to hear these stories to hear them and see the realness and the rawness of how we process them and how we dealt with it as a couple. Because I can say I don't know anyone personally who has done this in a marriage. Like, I don't know anyone who's had an abortion being married personally. Like, I've never spoken to them or known like what was their process, what was that like. how do they get to the other side of it? How do they solve it? Whatever the case may be. So that is why I'm doing this. Is not, oh yeah, I want everybody to know my business. I've actually lived a pretty private life till the past year. And part of that is I really am stepping into this vulnerability aspect of sharing my truths with everyone, no matter how hard they may seem. And that doesn't mean we're going to share them right away. Like we said, this happened in 2021, but sharing them at some point, just so people can once again learn from them, relate to them, and realize that, you know, things happen to all of us. Like life is not always rainbows and stars and sprinkles. I don't know, all the nice
Sprinkles,
things
that was a good one.
and all the good things in the world. Like we all go through our ebbs and flows, and all marriages have their ups and downs, and for all of us, that's different things. And for us, this is our story. So we'll start there.
Take me back to the months leading up to October of 2021.
Well, I mean, yeah, I would start in the summer. So August, I remember it was August 1st that I found out I was pregnant. So it's a recurring theme with every pregnancy we've ever had, that none of them have been planned. Um, and it's funny because like with the first, I would say three, maybe even fourth, three for sure. Fourth, I was starting to like dabble in it. I've been wanting to learn about my body and my menstrual cycles so I can track when I ovulate to avoid pregnancy that way. So basically, I don't want to use birth control. I was on it very young, at like 14, till I met Alex. I got off of it, and that was kind of why we had an unplanned first pregnancy, because I wasn't on birth control anymore. And for whatever reason, he thought he wasn't fertile, which clearly has not been an issue. Um, so yeah. But anyways, after that, I breastfed.
Doctor told me that.
Yeah. He went and got tested, and they said he was 19% fertile. And I said, go find that doctor and ask him if he got the numbers backwards.
We're suing for malpractice if you're
Anyways,
listening. I'm just kidding.
so anyhow, with my pregnancies, I've only had one period in between every child, and I'm pregnant, like that cycle. So like I get a period, I'm pregnant. I get a period, I'm pregnant. I get a period, I'm pregnant. And that's what I was going to say was I breastfed all my kids, and it's usually around like that 15 month, 15 and up. They never make it to 2 years old, and I'm already pregnant. So usually anywhere from like 15 to 18 months, I've gotten pregnant. So all my kids are like perfectly spaced 2 years apart, and everybody's like, oh, you planned that right. It's like, nope, wasn't even planned. It's just the way my body works. So I was getting the period, and then I ended up pregnant. So anyhow, happened again a fifth time. And this time I was starting to like track my cycles or like pay attention a little bit more, but I wasn't really doing my due diligence. So I wasn't like, oh yeah, I know I ovulate this day, but I was becoming aware of the signs. So the moment I missed my period, I was like, oh, I am probably pregnant. Oh shit. So I took a pregnancy test. And I remember we had friends in town.
Yes.
And I went and I showed him the stick. He looks at me like, what? And I'm like, I freaking told you, because I have been wanting him to use condoms. I told him, I was like, hey, while I figure this out, like, I need you to use condoms because I don't know when I ovulate. And clearly, like, if your penis just touches me, I get pregnant off of it. So I was like, we need to like not do that. And I think it was like the one time that he was like, oh, I'll pull out, like, don't worry, which he does. I still end up pregnant. And so anyhow, I was okay with it. Like I wasn't overjoyed with knowing that, but I was just like, okay, maybe this is where we're at. But the more and more like I sat with it alone, you were still going to work at the time.
Yes, I was
'Cause
so
it was the next month that you stayed home. He was still going to work. And so this was August 1st that we find out, whatever, like month of August goes through. And September 1st, we were actually talking about him re-enlisting in the Navy. And I remember that I had, we had talked about it and we had gone back and forth a lot. And like he basically had said like he didn't want to. And it was probably something that he wasn't gonna do. And then he comes back home on my birthday. He's like, yeah, by the way, I re-enlisted. It just makes sense. Blah, 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 blah. Like, wasn't a decision we talked about. He was just kind of like, yep, I'm doing this. And he did. And I was like, oh, cool. So it doesn't matter that I'm at home with 4 kids. At this point, Linabelle's like still having seizures around the clock. She's very difficult to handle, like very difficult to be with alone. Like I needed another person. And he decides that he's going to re-enlist, which for the rest of his career meant sea duty, meant deployments, like something that he had never gone with, thankfully, since we had been together and had kids. Like he never had been gone that long. I think 3 months was max. And all I had was like one 8-month-old baby. So it wasn't like end of the world. But now our situation, way more kids, special needs kids who needs extra attention. And he's like, I'm gonna re-enlist. And I was like, and I'm supposed to have another kid too. And I was like, wait a minute. I was like, am I really doing this by myself? Like, am I really going to raise all these kids here in this big house all by myself while he goes and plays Navy every day? And I was like, I can't handle this pressure. And that's when I started considering that I didn't want to keep the pregnancy. And I was just like, for my marriage to stay intact and for me to make it through this phase of life while my daughter really, really needed me, another pregnancy just would not be the answer. Like I personally did not believe that I could handle this situation mentally and like come out without a million scars on the other end. So that's when I started considering having an abortion. And I had been to Planned Parenthood before, and I know how people feel about that. I'm not really here for opinions about whether you like it or you hate it or whatever. Point is, they provide the services that I would have needed at the time. And, but they charged a ridiculous amount of money for it. So I was just like, I don't want to pay that much money to have this done. I also don't like doctor, hospital, office settings in general, which is why I birthed my babies at home. So that was like the other half of it. I was like, do I really want, like, it just feels not personal and cold and sterile environment. And I was like, I don't want to have to go there and like have to like spread my legs on a table and have this like done to me or to my body. So I started asking around some friends that I knew. There are natural ways to induce abortions through herbs and whatnot, but I'm not a herbalist. I don't know enough about it. I didn't, want to experiment with myself at this time with that. So, someone, I didn't know this, but at the time, someone told me that there's websites where you could, order pills from and they come right at your door. And I was like, perfect. I was like, that's what I want. So around 6 weeks, I got the pills of pregnancy. I was around 6 weeks pregnant. I went online and just like they said, like there was a local clinic that serviced the Virginia area and like one other state. And the pills came in my mailbox. And I didn't tell Alex anything about this. I think at one point he like one of the kids pulled the bag down out of the closet or something. And that's when he saw them and he's like, what is this? And I was like, they're abortion pills. And he's like, are you taking them? And I was like, I don't know. Like, I have them. And I still like, I hadn't made the decision. Like I had them there, but I still like, I was like, I don't know how I'm doing this, kind of thing. So he was, I could see that he was, I don't know, maybe you want to talk about how you felt, but I could clearly see that you were bothered by that.
Yeah. I won't get too much into like past details, but this wasn't the first time that abortion had come up. And so
Yeah.
when I saw the pills, a lot of sadness, grief, rejection came up big for me. I rejection came up big for me because I felt like she was doing this because she didn't want to be with me. She didn't want me. She didn't want, she didn't want to continue with me. A lot of stories came in my head at the time, and I remember this specifically. And the reason why I'm talking in this a different point of view right now is because talking with other men throughout after all this had taken down, all this had gone down, a lot of the things that I was thinking were, like what I felt from my childhood. And so like that was a big trigger for me. And like I felt like I was being abandoned, and that even though our pregnancy was unplanned and all of our pregnancies are unplanned, anytime abortion came up, uh, and it wasn't every time, but when it came up towards the end of, uh, you know, towards the end of all our children, I felt like she was trying to run, and I was scared and I was hurt, and I wasn't able to hold the idea of we. It was me versus her, and that clouded a lot of my judgment. And initially, when we found out on August about the fifth baby, I've not wanted to re-enlist in the Navy for 7 years, at this point. Around year 6, year 7 in the Navy, I let me take that back. Italy, I liked what I did. I liked teaching. I liked traveling. I just didn't like the.
I think it really came was on the ship, was the ranking process. That's what
Yeah.
like really started.
It
that
opened
you-
my eyes
Yeah,
again.
that you really started like, I don't want to be in the
I
Navy
I did.
anymore.
I realized. So I went. Thank you for that, because I was trying to think back,
It
like
was-
really what it
It
was.
was this, yeah. Well, we came
Um,
back stateside
Well, I
because you
remember.
were pretty happy in Italy,
I remember after. Well, when I say happy, it was like work-wise.
work-wise. Yeah,
Yeah.
like you felt successful in your career and everything. It wasn't until you got back that you were like,
I
what
was
am
being,
gonna-"
I was being seen, right?
Yeah.
So like my first 5 years, being on a ship, I didn't, for the first couple of them, you weren't there. So like I didn't have an issue. I was just grinding. I was just doing what I had to do. When I got to Italy, I started like I was starting to bear the fruit, right? I was starting to get to eat from it, because I was getting so much recognition for the things that I was doing. I was excelling, and I made chief, what I've always wanted to in the Navy. And so when I got back to the ship, it made me realize that I really don't like the Navy. I really don't want to be in the Navy. The reason why I was staying in the Navy was because then the needs that I wanted met were being met within my job. And it's funny that we were having a conversation with Grayson yesterday, our oldest, about the Maslow's hierarchy needs and how the military really leverages those to get young kids into the military. Young and so I'm not by any means going to bash that, but where I'm going with this is, when she told me that we were expecting our fifth, the idea of me getting out was ruminating in my head for a lot. It was taking a lot of space. And I started to like really be like, you know what, that is the path. And I heard that, and the fear popped up. The fear of failure, the fear of not being able to provide, the fear of being homeless, the fear of I have always tied my value into to how much money I'm bringing into my family. And so I reenlisted, even when she told me no, like, hey, let's like really lean into what you're feeling. Like I have your back no matter what. And that's one thing that I've always been admirable about, is like just still seeing more potential in myself than I have a lot of times. And I got scared, and I reenlisted. And so when I saw the abortion pills, I I just I went I disconnected even more. I wasn't trying to feel her pain. I wasn't trying to see it from her point of view. I wasn't trying to listen. I was just ready to respond, being reactive. Very long-winded.
No, I mean, you're good. It's your story too.
Yeah.
So yeah, we were at the time going to someone for I guess body work, but also spiritual work. And we had lots of long conversations with this person, and you know, she guided us and like, you both have to kind of do whatever is it that makes you happy, or you both have to like reach an agreement of what it is that you want from this kind of thing. So like we had talked about it, and like one thing I said was like I don't want to birth out of community. Like if I'm going to have this baby, I want full support. Like I need at least one other adult to help me raise these children, because I was like, I cannot do this by myself right now. Once again, because at the time, the situation with Linabelle was like really, really difficult. Like it's amazing how far she's come in a
Mhm.
year and a half. Like we are honestly like mind blown. She still requires, a little extra attention than most kids her age would, but it's nowhere near where we were in, August, September of 2021. Like, basically she would have seizures around the clock, and it's like you never knew when she was falling off something, if she's eating, whatever the case may be. So like somebody had to constantly like have an eye on her, be close proximity to her. And just imagine like living in a 1900 square foot house, wondering all the time, where's my toddler? Like I'm trying to cook and I'm like running around, where's my toddler? And I'm trying to do laundry and running around, where's my toddler? And I was just thinking about that, and then like having a baby on top. And I was like, how? Like, how can I possibly do this? Like, I don't know how without losing my sanity. So the Navy actually provides a program where you can have an in-house help for like 40 hours a month. And so we applied for that program. The woman came and we interviewed with her and everything. We just like kept going like back and forth about, well, we had applied, I think right when we found out about her. We had no calls for 9 months, 10 months, and like finally they call us while like all of this is happening. And I was like, okay, maybe this is the solution. But then again, it's only like 40 hours a week. But then by then he was actually staying home. And then we decided not to use her help because he was also home by now. Um, but I reached a point where I said, whether I keep this baby or not, he's not going to change. Like he is who he is. He obviously is going to chase his career and the money and those things. And he, like, in the way I saw it was like he kept running away from family life. Like that wasn't his number one thing. And I mean, you can say no, yes to that. I don't know, but that was like from where I was seeing it, like those were my thoughts. My thoughts were like he's running away from family life. He's never gonna be here to fully support us. And I was like, and I can't do this alone. Or, I rather almost do it alone than basically like have someone also dragging me down with this, because then we were just constantly arguing and fighting and this and that. And I was just like, I'd rather just do it by myself and not have to argue with anyone. And another big thing that I remember we argued a lot about was like I never had alone time. Like I was always with the kids. Um, and any time that I tried to get alone time, like there was always an issue with that. And I was like, well, if we're not together, there's no issue. Like we're gonna be on a schedule. Like you're gonna have the kids these days, these times, and I'm gonna have the kids these days, these times, and there shouldn't be an issue about it. And I honestly can't. I don't even remember like what. Oh, okay. I kind of do remember now. Yeah. So I typically don't go in and get like that early ultrasound scan or pap smears or anything like this, but I felt so out of touch with my body, with everything. And I was in a very like, I don't care. I remember going to the clinic and saying okay to all of this. So I went to the first appointment around 11 weeks, and I got a ultrasound. I got a pap smear. I did all this stuff, and I was just like, whatever. And that was a Friday, I think. And the next night, I started bleeding a lot, like bright blood, and I completely forgot about the appointment, the pap smear, all of that. So I thought I was, having a miscarriage. I thought that I just having an early pregnancy release, and I was like, okay. And I was part of me was like, oh shit, and then the other side of me was like, finally, like this is what I wanted, like, and I didn't have to do anything about it. Like it's happening naturally, perfect. And I ran to the supermarket, and then which I don't know if he knows this, but I'm here bleeding. I'm telling him I'm bleeding. I'm telling him I really need pads. If I'm not mistaken, you were watching a Tennessee football game. And I was like, I need to go to the supermarket. And you were like, okay, go. I got the kids. Like he didn't offer like, oh snap, my wife is bleeding. Maybe I should go to the supermarket and buy her the pads. And I remember sitting there and being like, he is so far gone in his own world that there's not even, like a moment to have a thought process and say, oh, something's happening. I should probably do something about it. And I remember like just shaking my head, like this man is not like it, yeah. I was like, I was very upset and I was just like, this is what I'm talking about. Like, I don't want to be with someone who, I've been with so many years, have 4 kids with. I'm bleeding right now, possibly having a miscarriage. And his thought process is, I'm going to sit here and watch the football game. You got this. Go to the supermarket. So I went and I bought the pads. But by Sunday, I realized like the bleeding had stopped. And he was the one who mentioned, like, oh, maybe you're just bleeding from the pap smear. And I remember saying, no, I'm having a miscarriage, even though I knew he was right. But I didn't want to admit that my bleeding had stopped to him. Um, And when I realized the bleeding had stopped, I was like, fuck. I was like, I really don't want to have this baby. Um, so when I woke up, he had on Monday, you left to do something Monday. I can't remember, but you took the kids. The kids had been in school, the boys, and the girls,
Um,
you had taken them somewhere.
you you passed Luca on Sunday.
No, it was Monday because you picked up the boys from school. So I took the first pill on Sunday. I remember that because when I woke up and I realized my bleeding has stopped, I was like, I'm not stopping this. And it was like it was a 3 pill process, but a 2 day. So you take the pill, 1 pill on the first day, you wait 24 hours, and then the next day you take the other 2 pills. So I remember Sunday I took the first pill, nothing happened, which is, normal. And then on Monday morning, I took the other 2 pills, and like within 3 to 4 hours, the baby had passed. Like I started having cramps and I started bleeding more, and the baby passed. And I remember that you ended up leaving to go get the kids from school and brought them back because they had been going to that a private school for
Yeah.
a couple of months. But anyhow, I just, when the bleeding had stopped from the pap smear, I was just like at this place where I was like, I really wanted this to be a miscarriage and it wasn't. And now I'm ready to do this because I was like, I don't want to be here. I don't, want to have this kid. I don't want to be part of this dynamic anymore. Um, and part of also like me doing this was I don't believe in like leaving my child somewhere to go work, to have a job. And that was part of me. Like, I'm claiming my independence. Like, I'm going to go work and I'm going to make this happen by myself with my 4 kids or however, but I need to be able to work. And if I have another baby, I won't be able to work. Um, so I was like, I cannot have this baby, and also like Linnevel's situation and everything. So yeah, Monday, with the cramping, the bleeding, whatnot, I go into the bathroom and I feel like a big clot is about to come out. Obviously, I don't know what it is. And I like run to the bathroom and I had a pad on and everything, but I felt it was so big that I was like, let me pull my pants down because it's all gonna like get squished in there. And as soon as I drop my pants, I try to like squat down to get lower to the ground so it wouldn't like splatter everywhere. And it just drops and it was like the entire baby. And I pick it up and I put it on the sink and I start studying it. And, it's like fully formed, super, super tiny, but it's fully formed. And unfortunately, like the head got bashed a bit when it dropped, but I could see it was a little boy. Like it had a little penis growing. Like you could, even though everything was like tiny little features, like he fit in the palm of my hand, you could see that it was a fully formed baby. And honestly, like I was in shock, my body was in shock. I didn't feel anything in that moment. I was very like I didn't feel anything. And I was expecting to like feel something. And I didn't feel anything. And I was just like, okay, this is weird. But I was like, maybe it's because I made the decision and that's why I don't feel anything. And I remember that Alex, like I kept hearing him pacing around the door and I just told him the baby was born. And I was like, it's a little boy. And he's like, what? How do you know? And I was like, because I can see its penis. And I hear him like just start crying outside the door. And I'm still standing here like, why is he crying? And I'm not. I don't want to talk about that.
You know, it's just, I had so much anger towards the Navy because she had made it sound like the Navy, like she never once during this process told me that she had taken the pills. And so like I was so infuriated by the Navy and the OBGYN, and I don't, I'm not gonna sit here and contest what she was saying. I don't remember her asking me for pads, right?
I didn't ask you. I said I needed pads.
Um,
Yeah, I didn't ask you, but I was like, I need pads.
Where I'm going with it is just like I was so disconnected from myself, and in that moment, I didn't realize that I was using Tennessee football to numb me out. I wasn't using sports to numb me out. And going back specifically, when she said she was having a miscarriage, I had this sickness, like sickness to my stomach the whole time as it was happening, from Saturday to Sunday to Monday. And I had some glimmer of hope that it was, it wasn't going to happen. There's this glimmer of hope that maybe it's just that, like it's some heavy spotting and that things would be okay. And then when she went in the bathroom and she said that, it just hurt because I never experienced the loss of a child. I've never experienced that, so I don't know what I was going to react to. And by no means, I love all my kids, but it being a boy, there was just something more about it that like stung. And I remember that she finally let me in. And a lot of my anger at that moment was that like I was looking at her, I was like studying Giselle and seeing like why is she not upset? Like why is she not crying? Why is she not showing any emotion? And as I look at the baby, I start to sob. I start to sob because I see that it's a it's alive. Like it's a fully intact baby. Yeah, like she said, that some things happened when the baby was born, but you could see everything. And I saw that he had 10 fingers and 10 toes and penis and eyes, and everything was developed. And so it was just hard to process that. And I became numb. Like I cried a lot in the car. I was screaming in the car getting the kids. Like I was banging the steering wheel, like cussing. I so much rage. Like I could have killed someone. Like I was so angry and I didn't know at what. I just knew that this wasn't fair and that why me? And I have a hard time saying this, but when I went and picked up the boys, as I came home, I told them, and Grayson, my oldest, was like, "What do you mean?" And just his reaction was really sad. Like I didn't expect that. I didn't expect that. And so it was I said yesterday that like I said this on a podcast yesterday that like sitting in your pain and understanding it. Like I sat with my pain, but I didn't understand it until right now as we're talking. Like the things that I had in place to cope, and just like I remember it vividly as she's saying it. Like I'm in the hallway pacing, just like please don't let it be true. Please don't let it be true. And felt weak. I dropped to my knees. I dropped in the middle of the hallway after I saw the baby and started screaming, crying. I don't know where we're going with that.
Well, I was just, yeah, walking through the process. So yeah, after that he leaves and I stay in bed, and it wasn't until later that night, I think he left with all the kids to do something, that I started feeling sad. And I remember I started crying, and I wouldn't cry in front of him though. So I cried a lot, but I would always like clean up my face and make sure that I looked fine whenever he was around. And the by the next day, and again, like I don't can't tell you exactly what I was thinking or my thoughts in this process, but or wasn't it was like 3 days later, I think, that you came up to me and you were like, I need to ask you something. And I was like, okay. And you were like,
It was the next day.
the next day?
Yeah.
Okay. No, because you said you had dreamt it 2 nights. It wasn't right away. It was like the third. It
Yeah.
was the third day.
Yeah. The next day was when you asked me for separation and divorce.
Yeah. So the next day, since I had made this decision, I was just kind of like, okay, for me, the next step is like to break this bond, end this marriage, because I'm not going to continue doing this with him. And I I told him to come sit outside with me because the kids were all inside. And
The two girls.
yeah, because the boys were back in school, but the girls were inside, and I was like, come, this is in October now. So baby passed October 25th. And I told him, hey, let's go sit outside, let's talk. And I was like, I want a separation. And I said, obviously we live in a house, we have 4 kids, all this, like one of us can't just go get an apartment. We're living off of his income. I didn't, like I had somewhat of an income, but not enough to sustain me and 4 kids. Like I'd be able to sustain myself, but that's about it. And so I told him, I said, I'll move out of the room. The kids were like in the big master bedroom. I was like, I'll move all my stuff out. I'll stay over there. And I said, we'll be on a schedule. Like, you'll have a schedule on when you're on daddy duty and you have to make dinners and you have to do all that. And then I'll be on a schedule on when I have to do it. And I said, I'm not doing your laundry. I'm not cooking for you. Like, I'm not taking care of any of your needs. Those are your needs. Like, basically, we're roommates, is what I told him. And I was like, unless, I invite you to dinner, like, I don't want you to come help yourself to dinner. Cause at that time I was still primarily doing a lot of the house chores and the cooking and everything, even though he had been home now for around 2 months. And I was like, yeah, it's unfair that I have to do everything, even though now you're home full time. Um, and I remember like he was very upset about it. And basically he was like, oh, I'll move out somewhere. And I was like, no, that's not fair. I was like, you're gonna stay here and you're raising these kids with me because we made them together. I was like, yeah, it's really easy to go move out and live somewhere and not have to deal with the kids all the time. I was like, that's the easy way. I said, but you're gonna stay here and we're doing this together. Um, so yeah, that decision was made. And I don't know, do you want to talk about that or say anything?
Yeah, I mean, the next day, I felt it coming. I really did. I've been running from it for a long time. And when she asked me to go outside, I knew that it was coming. And I didn't want it to happen. I didn't. But I also knew that the way that we were trying things, it wasn't working. I didn't want to admit that to myself. I refused to admit that to myself. And she said, "Look, I tried your way. We tried your way. Let's try my way." And I at the time I was like, okay. I didn't want to fight. I didn't want to argue. I was still trying to process what happened the day before. And I said, okay, like we'll set, we'll talk about the ground rules a little bit later and get on the same page. And as the ground rules like were being laid, I didn't really I didn't really have much. I'll be very transparent here. I didn't have issues with like doing my own laundry and stuff like that. What was hard for me was like the fact that like Giselle and I were no longer being intimate, and I felt like this in that moment. I felt like she was trying to see other people. We were disconnected sexually. We were having sex, but we weren't having like connected sex. We weren't. It was just more of a transactional, superficial thing. And so I've many times prior to that moment, she's asked to open our relationship. And so I figured like that was like, oh, this is her moment. She's going to do this. And this is why she's doing it. And I felt neglected again. Like the trigger, the trauma came up of like not being loved, being abandoned, unworthy. My self-confidence was low. Like externally, people didn't know that. But like within our relationship, like I really didn't have any confidence. I didn't really have any. I felt like she was looking outside more than she was looking inside, like looking inside our marriage. And so that's where I had a lot of hard times, and that's where like I was so much torn up. Not because I had to do dishes or I had to do laundry. Like I've done those, maybe not consistently and not a lot, but like it was more the fact that I didn't. I she didn't want me. And I know that there's more women out there. I know that like I get that. But being with someone, last 10 years at that moment, I wanted her to want me. And I had a different perspective. And oftentimes when I going back and having kids, I'm like, she needs me. And when you have that type of mindset, that the relationship is not going to grow. Like I remember, oh, yeah, she needs me now. Like I wasn't going to leave. Even the hardest times and like so being so frustrated with her looking outside and of the marriage and the things that I was experiencing, I was just like, I feel I feel somewhat safe inside with her, like having her. She's meeting my needs. But as like the disconnection grew more and more and more, my needs weren't being met. And I was like torn about it. So like when she asked for the divorce and separation, it was the ground rules of sleeping in different beds and all that other stuff, or laundry and stuff like that was not a big issue, but it was the story that was being created that she was doing this because she wanted to see other people.
And I mean, I definitely was not considering that in that moment at all. My main driving force was I had so much anger and resentment towards him and our dynamic at home that I was like, I'm not going to argue with myself. I'm not going to fight with myself. Like, I'm going to do everything I need to do and then I'll be good. And that was like my biggest thing was like, how do I get to a place where I'm not so angry and resentful all the freaking time with someone else while being with my kids? Because for me, a lot of that I noticed would spill over to the kids. Like, I'm short with my kids, I'm losing my patience with my kids. And then when I go back and I'm like, why am I losing my shit right now on my kids about something simple? I was like, oh, I'm not angry at them. Like, I'm mad about an argument I had earlier with Alex, or I'm mad because I asked him to do this 20 times and it still isn't done. And like things like that, that I was like, okay, well, this is easy. If I don't need to deal with him in that sense, then a lot of my anger is gone. And you know, I had tried over the years so many times, like we talked about going to marriage counseling and talking and this, and it just, I felt like I was always hitting a brick wall. So I was like, I'm done taking the sledgehammer to the brick wall. Like I'm just gonna walk away from the brick wall and just do this by myself. And by no means was this a separation or divorce looking for someone else. And I made that clear to him. I said, I'm not looking for another person. I am looking for my own happiness right now, and I'm looking for my own peace. And I'm looking to like raise my children with that peace and happiness by myself. Um, but obviously, you know, like I just say, if this doesn't work out, like, yeah, I'm going to find someone, but that's not the point of this right now. And I told him, I said, you know, like I'm willing to talk about this again in 3, 6, 9, 12 months and see what's there. But basically, like, you need to change as a person because I am unwilling to come back to you who you are as right now. I was like who you are right now does not work for me. Like it does not work for me, and it's not going to work for me in the near future. And I don't think it will ever work for me. I said that like right now you're not the man I want to be with. And I'm not going to force myself to be with someone that I don't want to be with.
I remember her saying that to me and having a conversation with my father. And I was so angry. I'm like, what do you mean that I'm not the man that she wants to be with? Like, and I rattled, you know, like I started to ramble a little bit, and he was like, Alex, I think she's being irrational. You put food over her head, you know, or food over her head, food on the table, roof over her head, and food in her food on her stomach, clothes on her back.
Yeah, there you go.
All right, thanks. I messed that one up.
Yeah.
But anyways, and he was like, what else does she need? And I'm like, yeah, what else does she need? Like, I'm fucking pissed. Like, this is bullshit. Like, I do everything. I sacrifice everything. And I started like getting in a me thing. And back in 2020, I don't remember why she sent it to me, but she sent me a podcast at the time. I think it was either right before Lumi was born or right after Lumi was born. You know what? It was right after Lumi was born because I had sitting on the deck that I had just built.
Good memory. It's like I want to hear what this podcast was.
So I remember back in 2020, she sent me this podcast. It was a Sacred Sons podcast, but it was specifically, you know, it was just a Sacred Sons podcast. And I don't know what made me choose this one podcast, but I started with a podcast that had Traver Boehm on it. And I didn't know who Traver Boehm was. I didn't know.
I was wondering how you came across him. Okay.
I didn't know, you know, like his work or anything like that. And I liked just what he was talking about on the podcast. I was sitting on the back deck in 2020 and I was like, well, this is interesting. And that was it. I listened to it and I got a little motivated for a couple days, but
this was my attempt of like showing him, because like he was saying, like I feed her, they have food, they have clothes, they have shelter. Like this was like my attempt of showing him like that's not all I want. Like I don't just want my physical needs met. I also want my emotional, my intellectual, like there's more than just food, shelter, and clothes.
Yeah. So I listened to that podcast, and you know, this is another story for another time, but back in 2020 when Lumi was born, I spent a lot of time building shit rather than like providing for her and my kids.
So he was home for 12 weeks right after she was born, like literally March 4th, you know, and like COVID hit the fucking shit fan like a week, not even a week later. So he was home then all the way through June. And I'm here with a newborn, and he's like in our backyard every day building stuff. And I'm like, hey, I'm in here with all these kids. And he's like, yeah, I'm in the yard. I'm working. And like, that was his thing, was like, I'm working in the yard. And I'm like, no, you're running away from the kids.
My driving force was like, and not to get off topic because this is not the theme of the podcast, but like the kids want, like, we had a backyard, a decent sized backyard for where we at, but the fences were terrible. They were not high. And there was a dog, and the kids didn't like going back there. So I built you know, I went to Home Depot, bought 6 foot high fence, wood fence, and I built a fence.
This is a rental.
It's a
This is
rental
not
property,
a
yeah.
house.
So like
It's an apartment. We were renting.
so anyways, that during that time is when I listened to this podcast. Well, let's fast forward back to 2021. She had broke the news to me, and I'm sitting here, and one thing that the work I do now is I realize that there's a trigger, there's a catalyst, there's some type of catalyst that happens in your life. It can be traumatic, it can be, just like a aha moment, whatever it may be. And I'm in this catalyst moment. I'm like, I don't want to lose her. I still feel like there's this glimmer of hope.
And he kept telling me that, and he was like I can change, like we can make this work. And I'm like, there is no way you're gonna be the man I need you to be next month. I'm like, there's just no way. I'm like, you got years of shit you need to unravel, and I don't want. And I told him, I was like, I don't want to be here for it. I'm like, you go unravel your shit and then come back and we can check in. But I was like, I don't want to be here for you unraveling your fucking shit, because to me, like, I had tried for 9 years, well, not nine, but I had tried for a lot of our relationship, at least for like 5 years, of like sending him these like different, information and this and that. And then like I'm doing
When I
my
say
own
sent,
work,
she
and
sent a lot. Like it was overwhelming.
this man is just like not budging. And I was just like, yeah, no, I'm done.
Like just on that topic, like when you think about like she was sending me information like every day, a couple times a day, and I wasn't in no means in the mindset of let me just take it one bite at a time. Like I was trying to drink the whole fucking water spout and I'm choking here. So I'm like, you know what? I'm not doing it. Like I'm having a hard time. This is too hard. It's harder to look inwards than to look outwards. And I was really good. My needs were, my big coping thing was like external validation. And since I was getting that met, especially in Italy, I was like, fuck this. Right. So um going back to where I was going with this is this catalyst moment happened. Yeah, hopefully our kids don't wake up.
We had white noise in the room and I just heard it turn off, and I'm like, oh.
So this catalyst moment happened, and I followed Traver Bone for a few months after that. I saw a little bit of what he was doing, and then I unfollowed him. And the ad popped up for the Uncivilized Nation registration. And I was like, you know what? Like, I feel like I see this as a sign. This is an opportunity for me to really like what's the worst can happen?
You waste a couple of grand and that's it.
What's the worst that could happen? So I join, like I said, start the process. All this, you know, I think that's the hardest step was just like at first was like, hey, you know what? I'm gonna do this and I'm gonna see where it takes me. I'm scared. Like I don't know who the hell these men are. And so I did it. And the following four weeks, I think, was like the hardest for me because I had more time to really sit with myself. And I wasn't using sports as much. When I get into these like little depression states, like these like sad, like a lot, that's the only thing that was on my mind. A lot of times when things at home weren't going well, that would affect me a lot, but I wouldn't say it to her. I'd be at work and I'd vent to like people that like I knew closely and, and ask for help. But like here, I was by myself with a lot. And I started to realize as I went back on the moment of of the abortion and then also like just little things in our relationship that I was repeating a cycle. And I remember a conversation when I first got married to Jasil from my dad. And no hard feelings to him. But he had said, Alex, he said, there's going to be a point in time where you have to make a decision. It's either your wife or your career. And he said, make sure you choose your career. And I sat there.
Solid advice.
I sat there and I was like, what? Well, I laughed at what he said at that time. I started laughing. I'm like, yeah, we'll see, Dad. We'll see what happens if that decision ever comes or if that moment ever comes. And I sat there and I was already so frustrated with the Navy with how things were going. I was putting a lot of my energy, a lot of my effort, my passion, my drive, and I wasn't getting that external validation. I wasn't getting the results that I should have been, that I really deep down believe and people, you know, around me believed. And so I said, at the end of the day, what is it worth if my family's not here? And I'm, you know, I do 20 years in the Navy, I get the pension, you know, I do everything that they say that society tells you to do, but my wife and kids aren't here to enjoy it with me, to enjoy life. And through this process of this reflection process, which was pushed onto me by these men, and I started listening to these men's stories, and I realized I wasn't alone. That there were other men that were out there that were going through the same thing, that have gone through the same thing that I've gone through, and that, you know, just listening to their stories was able to open my eyes up and allow me the opportunity to vent about a lot of things, the opportunity to talk about the abortion, and get the anger that I had for Jasil out. Oftentimes, and I say this for myself, like I'm speaking as myself, but I've come across a lot of men, so like this is a consistent theme. But for me, I wanted Jasil to feel every need, like not wanted, but like I felt like that was what, like the, you know, like a normal relationship was. That was the traditional relationship. Like, you know, she filled every need for me, and so that pulled down, you know, a lot of our polarity, our, you know, our spark. So as I was doing this with other men, I started to see a little bit change in our relationship. I don't know, you know, and I know she's talked about it before, where she's seen this change, but like on my from my perspective, like talking with these men and being able to get this out was so comforting.
I mean, throughout the years, he had a tendency of wanting to vent to me everything. And when I say everything, that was like even our own issues. And I'm like, you can't use me as a therapist about us. Like, that does not work. So I would always tell him, like, you need friends, you need people to talk to, like, you need to stop trying to like talk to me about things that I can't really like, because we would just argue, right? Because it was just like, I'm gonna tell you the things about you, and then it would just turn into an argument. So, and I remember like always telling him that throughout the years. I'm like, you need friends, you need people to talk to. Like, I cannot be the person you talk to. And I remember like, especially early on in our marriage, he would get annoyed when he heard me talking with my sisters, like about us and the issues we had and all this stuff. And in my head, I'm like, well, who am I supposed to, and I would ask him, like, who am I supposed to get it out to? Like, who am I supposed to vent to? Like, I can't vent to you about you because then we're just gonna argue. And he like never got that. And it was like finally, like for the first time in his life, he started understanding why you need to have conversations. And granted, there's a huge difference of venting, bitching, and then having conscious conversations. And you know, throughout the years, that's what we've been refining is having more conscious conversations. And I'm not saying every now and then a vent session doesn't feel great, and like you should make space for that too. But I guess knowing the intention of what you're entering the conversation, like, are you here just to vent? Do you just want to bitch and moan, or do you want to have a conscious conversation? And you know, that's something that we've changed in our relationship dynamic is that we ask ourselves, like, do you just want to vent, or do you want to have a conversation? And there is a difference in that. But he finally found a group of men that he could do all of those with, and that actually had useful things to say back. Because the biggest thing is like throughout the years, there has been men here and there that he's talked to, but they give the worst advice, you know, and they say the worst things, like almost like putting the fuel to the fire, like, oh, you're mad about that? Here's more fuel. And it's like, okay, that's not helpful.
Yeah, and so like I had that with, you know, being able to talk with men and like process the emotions, like say, hey, I need to jump on a call. And then I also had the aspect of like establishing a self-care routine because I didn't have one for myself. Like I was serving everybody else, like I was always going with the flow and doing what everybody else wanted. And I also like sports was what I realized, what I've come to realize is that sports was a big coping mechanism for me. And I kept immersing myself into sports. I love sports, don't get me wrong, and I feel like I'm pretty good at a lot of things that I do, um, in sports, but it was a coping mechanism. And so I've learned that I didn't have a self-care routine. I wasn't working out consistently. I wasn't journaling. I wasn't meditating. I wasn't sitting in stillness. I wasn't doing things that could help my mental health. and helping me raise the level, the bar within myself. And so joining this men's group, the initiation, that process helps you establish some type of self-care routine. And with cold showers, push-ups, journaling, meditating, so on and so forth. And that's something that's been, like for a long time, it was hit or miss. Like I'd go weeks with hitting it every single day and then I'd miss a couple weeks. But I'm starting to taper that out and be, stabilize to be a more consistent process. And so that's what came from that was a self-care routine. Because if you can't love yourself or you can't care for yourself, like me, I wasn't doing that. I wasn't showing up the way that every other relationship needed me to.
And I remember like that was one of the big points that I made to him when we talked about the separation and the divorce. I was like, I don't love myself right now, and you don't love yourself. And I said, it is impossible for us to love each other when we can't even love ourselves first.
Yeah.
And I remember like telling him like I need to find my own happiness and what makes me happy so I could bring that into a relationship. And I said, and you need to do the same for yourself.
Yeah.
I said, because our entire relationship, you have looked to me for your happiness. And I said, it doesn't work that way. I said, like, you need to find what makes Alex happy by himself without Justine, without the kids, without the Navy, what makes you happy. And that was like my biggest thing. I was like, when we both find that, then we can talk about coming back together. And I don't know, do you want to talk about your dream on why you
I was about to go into that.
asked me?
Yeah, so throughout all this process of sitting with myself, I don't know if it like stimulated something, but like the following few days after she had the abortion, I had this dream with Luca. Now we named it Luca. We had this dream with Luke. I had this dream with Luca, and it was a baby popped up, and it was like Axis, like basically that I interpreted that he was killed. Like he wasn't like the Navy. There was something more to it. I didn't know what it was, and I had this long conversation. I remember having a very long conversation with the spiritual teacher in the car, and she was like, you have to be prepared either way. Like if she did, then like what is the value or what is the point behind what you're like the information you're seeking? Can you handle this information? And like what is it gonna do to you all? And I sat there and to go a little bit further back, the times that she had mentioned abortion in the past, I manipulated her to the point of like, I will leave you. I'm not going to be with someone that is going to have an abortion. It was very a manipulative tactic that I was doing with what she was saying. I wasn't hearing thoroughly like what she was wanting. Like she's always come out and said, "Hey, I want more, like I want to be stimulated, intellectually, emotionally, like I need more." And I didn't know what more was. So, but I wasn't getting that message. It wasn't staying. So for me, I was manipulating them, saying, "Hey, if this happens, I'm not staying with you. I'm leaving." When I asked her for the first time in my life, like legitimate life, I can say that I was able to hear the pain in her voice. I was able to hear her. It wasn't responsive. It wasn't a reactivity for me. Like I heard when she said yes, I did take the pills. I knew the pills were there, and I after I had the dreams, I searched for the pills and couldn't find them, and so that made me like, you know what? I think she did, and I need to get this off my conscious because I'm having these dreams. I looked for the pills where she normally had them. They weren't there. Uh, I need to ask her. And I was so surprised by my own
Yeah, like
reaction
I
and
expected him
response.
to blow up and say nasty shit and whatnot, and I was just like, well, I don't care at this point. I'm like, we're going our separate ways. So
And I asked her and she said, yeah. And I just sat there and I said, I can hear the pain. And I'm so sorry that I put your put you to the point where you had to make that decision. And I
I
think,
mean, no one makes
yeah,
anyone make a decision, but that that is a choice I made in that
Yeah.
situation. But anyhow, I feel like we lasted a long time talking about this. But I mean, it is not something you can really shortcut. But I just, I guess to speed things up a bit, within a few weeks of him, diving into this men's group and doing all this, like he's coming to me like, oh my gosh, like there's so many other people going through these things and this, and I was like, yeah, I've been telling you this for years. Like, why is this a surprise to you? That other humans in marriages and relationships go through the same things of like having these issues and he but it was the first time that he was like getting excited about this stuff and he was coming to me, like it wasn't me going to him. And I was just like taking note. I was like, okay, okay. And I saw him, doing things that he wasn't doing before, like journaling and this and that. And like I started seeing the little changes and stuff. But in my head, I'm still like, well, I don't know. Like, is this permanent? Is this gonna stay? Or is he just gonna like revert back to doing, the same things again? And I don't remember at what point we decided for me to move back in. I really don't. I don't remember. Um,
Well, I can say that I remember it was like 4 weeks had passed or something like that, and you went to your grandma's in Pennsylvania,
yeah, for her birthday, I remember that.
and you came back, and we had a really hard conversation. I realized that I have a lot of insecurities around just maybe sexuality in the sense of like she had asked to open up the relationship many times, and like that topic fucking I start to restrict, I start to have a hard time breathing, I really get very uncomfortable with it. And we had a conversation, we had this hard conversation about it, and I was able to stay open and like listen, um and that was where I implemented for the first time a boundary. I was like, look, I hear where you're at, I understand where you're at, but for me at this moment, this is where I'm at, and that's where I stand. That's how I left it. And that night we had sex. Um, I don't know what was going through her mind, but like we had sex, and the next day we had sex. Um, and then like getting back to that, having sex for the first time in like 4 weeks was, and that feeling there was a spark. Maybe it was just like she was, that made. I can't speak about the instance, but if it was a different type of feeling for me.
Well, I mean, if I had to speak at the time, I can't really say then what I was thinking because I don't remember. But now, like looking back, I remember that there was an attraction. Like I felt a polarity, like a push pull, where usually never felt that way before. And I remember like that in my head where I was like, ooh, like I like this, like I like what you're becoming. And I was like, I was actually like, I felt an attraction again, which was something that I hadn't felt for a long time.
Yeah.
And I remember that's when like I started to desire you again.
So that happened, and then I maybe a few weeks later, right before Thanksgiving. No, right, yeah, right after Thanksgiving, we were like, you know what, we're just gonna move back in, and we're gonna do this,
Yeah, and then the whole RV thing happened a few weeks after that.
and it didn't come without like we had ups and downs. Like when I got hurt, I hurt my back.
We'll talk about that at some
Yeah,
other time. But anyhow, I want to wrap up this one because we still have to talk about the miscarriage.
yeah, I forgot about that.
Yeah. So anyway, about 2 or 3 weeks after the abortion, we had taken the baby and put it in a container and I had frozen it because we didn't know what to do with it and we wanted to do a ceremony and we just didn't know what yet. Like I was like, let me just recover, let's wrap around our minds around everything that's happening. And we decided to buy an orange tree. Yeah, it's a tree. I was gonna say plant, but it was a tree, an orange tree. And I still had the girls the last two births. So Lumi and Linabelle's placentas frozen as well. And we bought a big pot and a bunch of dirt. And we brought the kids and we brought candles and we had a little ceremony because Grayson was still really, sad about it, and it would come up, and he was drawing a lot of pictures about our new family with Luca, and he was, talking about him every day. And we figured it was a good opportunity for us to like close that circle as a family. And we did a little ceremony in our sunroom at night with candles and sage and, you know, prayers and intentions, and said some words, and we all got to bury him and the placentas, and we planted the orange tree, and that was our way of closing out his physical body in this realm.
We lit a candle.
Yeah.
One of our friends um, talked about the power of like the intention behind lighting a candle. When
So we had like a little altar where we burned a candle every day
for 3 days.
and I was gonna say something, I lost my train of thought. Where was I going with this? I don't know.
My fault. Not my fault that you lost your train of thought.
No, you threw me off.
I did stick with that.
I was gonna say something else.
Well, she's thinking about that. Let me once again. I was so moved and I get emotional when I think about it. But
I
like,
remember.
okay, go ahead.
No, I mean, you
I can't give me a time to. I was about to tear up a little bit, so I can breathe.
Okay. What I was going to say was what was interesting was that this baby came to many people through dreams, through other things before they even knew what was happening, before I had told anyone I was pregnant, before I told anyone I had an abortion. And, like both of my sisters had visits essentially from him. And it was wild to me because I hadn't told anybody, you know. And my older sister, so I had told her I was pregnant. And one day she's like, "Oh, hey, how's she?" I think she was, yeah, she was the one who was like, "How's baby Luca doing?" And I said, "Baby Luca, question mark?" And she's like, "Yeah, the baby boy in your stomach." And like, how would she know? I was like 7, 8 weeks pregnant. So when he was born and I saw he was a boy, I was like, holy shit. And then my younger sister told me that she had a dream that she had a baby, but in their dream, like her belly was huge, like 9 months pregnant, and she was having an abortion or a miscarriage. But she's like that in her hand, the baby was actually the size of her palm. And when I showed her a picture of Luca, she was like, that was the same exact baby in my dream. And then my mom was there trying to help her. And this was like, I didn't tell her I had an abortion. And like, she told me this, and I was like, holy snap. Um, just so many synchronicities. And then we had a friend that she says, right as Alex texted her, telling her that I had a miscarriage, because that's what I had told him, that they had just turned on the Disney movie Luca. And she didn't know about my sister saying that this was baby Luca, and it's just so much, things that happened around that all of this. And I'm not, I have not regretted my decision. Have I been saddened by it? Like, yes. Like grief hit me hard. And that was something I was very surprised about, because in my head, I was like, I made a decision, like I should be okay with it. But I cried for weeks and weeks and weeks. And still every now and then when I see his pictures, like I get very emotional about it. But I have never regretted the decision I made, because I don't, like, when I think back of what life would look like if I didn't, I don't know if that's the life I necessarily would have wanted for myself. And granted, like, no one knows what would have happened, but to me, there was a closeness and a dedication and intention as individuals and as a family after that happened, to like really make it work and really figure this out, versus like letting it all fall apart or continue what we were doing. And that's something that I'm always extremely thankful for to Luca, is the way I see him, is that he was just brought here to shed light and bring us together. And I thank them for
Yeah, it's the power that he's brought us all, you know, that was the message that I was going with. The impact that he's had on Grayson. You know, when we had that ceremony, Grayson was very emotional. And since that day, he's always talked about wanting a baby brother. And I can't speak because I wasn't like as focused on him in this sense, but it feels like ever since, you know, Lucas came and gone, that he's like been more caring of young babies. Like he's had this infatuation with babies. Like yesterday, you know, you all went out and he was playing with a little 1-year-old and carrying it.
Yeah, we're at a at a mall play center, and there was like a 1-year-old, and he was on the floor crawling around with him, playing with him, and like the whole time, like he just wanted to
Yeah.
play with the baby.
And just the power that's transformed us all. You know, like she's right. You know, I say she's right. The point she said was very on the path that when I look back, I don't know I would be here if it wasn't for this situation. I don't know I'd be in an RV if wasn't for this. I don't know if I would be out of the Navy if it wasn't for this. And this perceived failure that I, for the longest time, perceived as a failure, has been my biggest success. Has given me the greatest growth. Has allowed me the opportunity to look internally and to show up for myself more, so I can show up for my sons, my daughters, and for my wife. And so that I can really live a life more than just my job. My purpose was like my value, my identity was tied up into the Navy. And it has allowed me, this opportunity has allowed me to look inward and to know that there's more than just working the 9 to 5 or working the corporate job, like going up the corporate structure. Like there's other ways of living. And I was scared of those other ways of living. I thought they were a threat. And I'm here, sitting next to my beautiful wife, with my kids in the back, having conversations that I didn't think I would ever have, holding space, seeing my wife be vulnerable, remembering that I thought that shit just came. I didn't know that I had to build trust. I didn't know that like internally I had to do work to be able to hold that space. So I'm grateful, very grateful for Luca. I'm very grateful for this. And yeah, like she said, like I still get emotional. I still grieve. I still think about him daily. And I know Grayson does. We talk about it a lot. He mentions it to me more. And so he's with us. He'll always be with us. And this, do you have anything else on like this is, it really hit me hard when this past year, Jasil was pregnant again. Sometime in August or September
24th.
September 24th. She passed the baby, but like in August she found out she was pregnant.
July.
Okay. I felt like it was the day before the initiation, which was in August, the last week of August, that you told me, and I was.
Oh yeah, it was August because I was 8 weeks on the 24th.
So in August, she showed me right before the initiation. I went to this men's retreat in Colorado that she was pregnant, and we were moving forward. We were gonna move forward with it. There was no hesitation in her mind, and I was like extremely excited because I felt like this was an opportunity to grow at a different, deeper level with each other,
yeah,
and with our family. And
I mean, I was also looking forward to it because now Linabelle, like we said in the past year, she's healed so much and she's made so much progress. So I was like, okay, this is doable, you know, because she hadn't had seizures since March, which we're coming up on a year now that she hasn't had any seizures. She's been off all meds since June of 2022. So all these things that I was like, okay, like if we keep moving in this direction, like I can see myself having another kid. Um, and now he's, you know, he's home, he's out of the Navy, so I don't have to be afraid of him like possibly having to leave again. And just, you know, different situation, different dynamics, you know, things were really good between us. And I was, you know, I was welcoming it. I was like, there's a reason why babies keep choosing us. And like, granted, yes, I know how it happens in the physical realm. Um, but it also, you know, getting pregnant is not something that happens to everyone, even the people who physically try for many, many years. So I was like, there is also something else, a bigger, you know, spirit's energy at play here that we keep winding up with babies. So
Yeah,
I
so
was like, I welcome this spirit, whoever it is, and it's here to stay.
yeah, when she told me that, like the joy, the excitement, you know, I told everyone at the initiation that I was expecting. And I'm sitting here, you know, like with the intention of like all these things started to come up for me that I never felt before, in a good positive way. And then in September, she
I went out to Walmart that day with the kids, with the boys,
So I-
the grocery shop.
so I do remember this. The day before we went on a 10-mile bike ride that was pretty rough. And I say this for a reason. They said it was an easy bike ride. The first 5 miles, 5.5 miles were easy, but the back, you know, 3.5, 4 were like,
I mean, it was fun.
it was rough, but it was fun. Like we had fun. And the next day she said she went to Walmart. She's, you know, and I'll let her speak on it, but like when she told me that she was bleeding and that she thinks she's having a miscarriage, the cycle hit again. I started to think like, let me go check the abortion pills. I started to get I started to pull away a little bit. We're talking about recent, we're talking about in September, I started to pull away again. I started to I think about me versus her, even with all the work, right? I started to wonder, like, could it have been the bike ride? Like, was it the bike ride that caused this? I was trying to point to somewhere to try to figure out what the hell was going on. And then the reason why I bring this up is because the work that I've done around this doesn't mean that it's gonna go away. You know, like these things come up still, and it came up for me. And it took me, I think, like 2 days to realize that that's what was coming up. And I voiced it to you. I think we talked about it a little bit. Not in the depths of like me thinking that you had an abortion again.
No, you didn't say any of that to me
But
at the time.
but I did tell her that like I felt myself pulling away. I started to like get back to a place where before where I was just disconnecting from her. I remember our friends were in town, or my friends were in town, the men that I had met and gone through a leadership crucible and coaching certification with. And not honestly not thinking anything of it, I asked her to cook for them, and she was having a miscarriage. And it didn't hit me till later that night when I was like, holy shit, like I repeated it. Like I asked her to do something when she was going through some shit. And I say all that because once again, starting to feel the same shit, like the same emotions, the same feelings. And I realized that I read an article weeks prior, and I don't even know why I read the article, but it talked about that there's a higher risk of miscarriage after abortions than just regular pregnancies. And after sitting with it for a few days, that's where I came to the like conclusion that, you know, this is possibly just there's something, I've been able to shift and say, what is the lesson from these experiences? Like, what am I, what am I supposed to learn from this, or what am I gonna get out of it? And there's not always the lesson, but like, I'm looking.
I mean, it's just like everything you've just explained is like being on the drama triangle. You know, you're always looking for something to blame, someone to blame, and either you're playing the victim, the hero, or the villain, and you're looking to place blame on one of those. So, you know, you were looking for who's the villain here, and one of the ways that we improve that over time is not that you never go into the drama triangle. We all do, but it's that shift. It's how fast you're able to shift out of it.
Yeah.
And you know, lastly, it's just accepting that some things just are. You know, like yes, you can find the lessons in it and this, and what can it possibly, what can I learn from this, and all those questions. And sometimes things just are like, and it's that acceptance that life just is. That's what that's what sat with me. Like I was sad about it. I didn't want it to happen. And then, you know, I was just like, this is what's happening right now. Like I'm not thinking about the future. I'm not gonna think about the past. I'm just gonna sit with it right here, right now. And this is what's happening in this moment. And there's nothing for me to do other than to be here in this moment. Because anytime I start thinking about like where we should have been in April or May, you know, with a baby and this, like, yeah, that's where the suffering comes from. That's where the grief kicks in. That's when you get sad. That's when you want to cry. Because you start thinking about all the things that haven't even happened. And whenever I would reel myself back into the moment, into the present, into my body right now, like it's okay. Like this is what's happening, and that's okay. Like this is just part of nature. This is what happens. And you know, if I went to the past, then I was blaming myself because I'm like, this is because I had an abortion last year. You know, like now my body doesn't know how to hold a baby or whatever. And it's like I had to continually bring myself to the present moment and not try to find who there is to blame, because then you get caught in those cycles and spin out of control. And you know, it was a few days of me like resting at home and kind of going through that, and to keep my mind busy in between time, I started diving into like human design and gene keys, and I was reading a ton about that, and that made me really happy. And that's what I did with my rest time. But yeah, once again, for the sixth time, we got pregnant unplanned. And you know, once again, it was received well by both of us. Like we were ready to have another child, and it didn't happen. So
yeah, I just, this came up for me and I wanted to get it out there. Is that like two things came up, but I'll speak about this one first. Is we tied back to when we conceived, and that was a magical moment. That was a big shift in our relationship.
it was August 4th.
August 4th. For another podcast, just so opened up about looking outside of our marriage and clearing some air, and me being able to hold that and
We'll talk about it in another podcast.
yeah.
Don't give away the juice.
Okay. So doing that that night, she had opened up, and a lot of things moved, and we had sex,
And I knew I was ovulating. Like I knew that.
it was a magical moment.
And I told him, I was like, oh no, I didn't tell him, but I knew. No, yeah, I had told you earlier that day.
You said, I think I'm ovulating.
No, I was like, I'm ovulating. Like I
didn't perceive it that way, but that's okay.
No, I remember. I said I'm pretty sure I'm ovulating. That's what I had said. I'm pretty sure. I never say I think. I was like, I'm pretty sure I'm ovulating, which I was. And you know, we were just having really, really passionate sex, and I didn't stop him and put on a condom, and he didn't have a condom, and I knew he was coming, and I was like, oh well, kind of thing. And that was that.
So like where I was going with that is like knowing the conception, knowing how that like this life that we show, like the life forming inside of her, like there was so much deeper connection with it, I felt. And so there was sadness on that when I sat with it, like what, and ruminated. And then the last thing, it came to me right now is that I was a lot of sadness again because we told the kids that we were expecting early on because we were excited about it.
Yeah, so we told them right away.
And the kid, and then like the boys were like jumping up and down, screaming, excited. And we would talk to Lumi all the time, our youngest, and be like, "You're gonna be a big sister," and she's like, "Yes." Like she's really excited, and so when we had to break the news again, it was really sad, and so
which we didn't obviously tell the kids I had an abortion. We just said the baby didn't make it, so they, I don't. That's not something I feel like they need to know now. Maybe when
they're older and they listen to this podcast.
In the future, that's something we tell them. But for now, all we say is that, I lost the baby.
So that's what came up for me in the miscarriage. I don't know if you want to speak more into it.
I mean, it was, it almost feels like there was a lot less for me there because I know it was just what happened at the moment where my choice in the past was like a decision I made, and that felt a little heavier for me to carry and like unravel and peel back the layers for myself. But once again, like I look at what I have, and I have 4 beautiful children, and I'm not like it is what it is, and I have 4 awesome kids.
Yeah.
And the more the merrier.
And we're expecting again.
Number 7. So if you stayed listening this long, I guess.
I honestly was gonna. I was editing this out. I just wanted to see. I was looking at your face to see what you.
Well, if you don't, you don't.
August of 2023.
I guess whoever likes to hear us ramble will know the truth.
Our families don't know. Our kids don't know. No one knows.
Well, 28, 29,
yes,
27?
29 people
no
that we shared the new year with in Dominican Republic know.
Yeah, they're the only people who know.
So if you're listening, thank you.
And I will say this, right? I've never had an issue sharing my pregnancies in the past, but for one reason with the kids right now, because the abortion and the miscarriage, I was like, I'd rather wait to make sure that, something else doesn't happen, because I don't know, like Grayson can handle another bad news. So we agreed to wait to tell the kids till I'm a little further along.
You're making me keep this in there now. The more that
and I am making you keep this in here. And the reason we haven't told our family, well, at least my family, is there's like a running joke, like another one. And it's just like, it comes with this sense of like, there's no joy and happiness for us. And, like something we laugh about and we joke about, it's like whenever people reprimand us or like try to tell us something, I'm like, last time I checked, I'm not asking anybody to take care of my kids or feed them for us. Like last time I checked, we take care of them, we feed them, like we're not on government assistance, or I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that, but like we're not going around like telling people take care of our kids for us.
Yeah.
So whenever people are like, are you really gonna do that again? I'm like, what is it to you? Like, why does it matter to you? Like, do you need to babysit them? Did I ask you for grocery money this month?
Yeah.
Like, why do you care?
The goal is a football team. We have to get to 11. So
11.
Right. We're currently looking for land to get cows, and I'm gonna let Giselle frolic in the field,
but I don't think he's joking.
And I'm going to.
So he doesn't remember this, but when I met him, it wasn't even like 6 months of meeting him, maybe 6 months. He's told me, he's like, I want 6 to 8 kids.
I don't remember it.
He's like, I don't remember saying that. I was like, oh, I remember that, like crystal clear.
So then we got 3 more to go.
But anyhow, that is the reason we haven't told our family members right now. And not that everyone has that reaction, but it's always like a running joke in my family, like, Giselle's pregnant again, haha. Which cool, yeah, it's funny. And at the same time, the reaction we would like to receive is what we received in Dominican Republic, where everybody was just happy for us and
Give us
saying
hugs.
and congratulations, and that's it. Like there
Yeah.
was no, do you know how that happens? Do you guys watch TV? You know how babies are made, right? I'm like, yeah, okay.
It was a good, and it was
haha,
also a good,
whatever.
I say lesson, but just a good experience in the sense of these were strangers
Yeah,
and they didn't give us any like crazy
shit.
type of fanfare.
Yeah,
And the type of fanfare that we receive from our families is a different thing. So
Yeah.
it was, and I'm not by any means bad mouthing our families, like, but these strangers gave us more love and
Yeah.
this moment about this topic than I would expect
from family.
from family.
So that's why we've kept it to ourselves. It's been 12 weeks now.
12 weeks. Yeah.
No, it is.
Oh,
I think it is.
I need to change the baby bump app that I was
Oh.
using to track because it
Maybe-
says 10 weeks and like,
No, yeah, it's 12.
well, cool. First
So.
trimester. See you later.
Pirates.
Alligator in a while, crocodile.
So
All right.
yeah, you stayed this long.
Congratulations. You know the secret.
Shh.
Don't tell anybody.
We won't admit it in public.
Because we're not telling anybody. We're making our listeners, if you've listened this long, listen. So thank
And
you.
we're not telling you there's a surprise at the end either.
Yeah, we're not including that. I will not include that. You have to listen to it. So you've won the race. The race.
Yeah, like we tell, so the kids know how, conception happens, as at least like, the sperm meets the egg, and Grayson's always like, I was the best.
Yeah. I said he is the champion
I'm like,
of life.
yeah, you did.
You're
I
the
was
champion
like-
of life, Grayson.
I was like, we all are. All right. Peace. I'll leave you with, have you ever been hated or discriminated against? I have. I've been tested and demonstrated against. Pick a sides for my wicked rhymes. Look at the time. Sick as a mind as a motherfucking kick is behind. All right.